Don't move. He looked at me with a suppressed gaze. Luna, do you know that guys' Adam's apples shouldn't move randomly? What will happen if it moves? He bent down to kiss me, kissing me until I could only hold onto his waist to catch my breath. Then he calmly said, "It will be like this." I didn't like Jimmy at first. Because he is my stepmother's son. My grandmother didn't like my stepmother. She thought she was too beautiful, and that beautiful women are inconsistent. My grandmother secretly told me that this woman just wants my dad to help her raise her son. I was on guard for a long time, and I was also cautious for a long time. During this time, my stepmother has always been nice to me. She would take me shopping for clothes, buying me more expensive clothes than she bought for her son. If her son wants to buy a book, she will always buy one for me as well. Even though I don't study biology or participate in information competitions. Is this a way to please me? Or should I say, a sugar-coated bullet? I spoke frankly. I said, "Auntie, please don't try to please me. Flattering things won't last long. I don't want to have a psychological gap." My stepmother's smile froze, and my dad started scolding me. He has never really scolded me from childhood to adulthood, but this time he said I was difficult and stubborn, and that no one would want to deal with me when I enter society. I slammed the door loudly. It must have been winter then, and the weather was quite cold. There was heating at home, but when I ran out, I didn't even wear a down jacket. I was freezing. I wanted to go to my grandparents' house, but I found that I didn't even bring my phone, so I couldn't take a taxi. At that moment, I felt so pitiful. Really pitiful. People were bustling on the street. There were mothers and children eating candies, couples snuggling up to eat dinner, and someone holding a bag talking on the phone saying they should come home early today to make pasta for dinner. It seemed like they all had someone to care for them, except me. So I cried. I cried so loudly, very embarrassingly. I knew that people around were looking at me, but I couldn't help it. The lady from the supermarket came out and asked me, "What's wrong, young lady? Why are you out dressed like this with so little clothing? Do you want to come in and warm up?" Jimmy came at that moment. He told the lady, "My sister had a quarrel with her family. I'm taking her back, thank you." He was handsome, had the air of a good student, and the lady believed him right away. She even persuaded me, "Hey, young lady, this is not a big deal. Go back with your brother quickly. It's very cold outside. Don't freeze yourself." I was very angry. How come everyone thinks it's my fault? Jimmy was still thanking the lady when I pushed him away forcefully. "Who are you pretending to be a brother?" He stumbled back with a frown, saying, "Stop making a scene." Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the lady quickly intervened. "Girl, go home quickly, talk things out at home. It's so cold outside, look, your face is all pale." It seemed like only then did Jimmy notice. He took off his down jacket and stuffed it towards me without saying a word. I didn't refuse. 1, it was really cold, and 2, this jacket was bought by my dad for him. Why couldn't I wear it? I was going to wear it, and it would be even better if Jimmy got a cold and a fever, impacting his exam performance. Thinking about this, I stopped causing trouble, put on the down jacket, and even put on the hat, just revealing my eyes. I am already considered tall among the girls, but Jimmy is still half a head taller than me. His down jacket is loose on me when I wear it. I deliberately followed him slowly, getting closer to the entrance of the residential area. Suddenly, the pocket of the down jacket shook. I took out my phone. He reached out, but I didn't give it to him. Right in front of him, I answered a call from a girl named Lily. "Jimmy, are you free next weekend? It's my birthday, will you come?" The girl's voice was quite sweet. I spoke in a tone even sweeter than hers. "Oh, sorry, next weekend is my birthday too, so he can't make it." Jimmy frowned again, reaching out to grab the phone from me. I dodged his hand, continuing to chat with the girl on the phone. "What? Who am I to you? Who else can get his phone?" "Luna, stop this nonsense." Jimmy was very annoyed, grabbing my wrist and snatching the phone away. In that moment when he snatched it away, I hung up the phone. He held the phone, typing quickly with his fingers, probably explaining things to the person on the other end. After a minute, he looked up at me, looking at me like I was garbage. Then he ignored me. Turned around and left. The cold wind blew, but I didn't feel cold at all. I was actually quite happy inside. The feeling of vengeance being fulfilled. My dad was right, I am stubborn and willful. But so what, as long as I'm happy. When did I realize that I liked Jimmy? It was too early, I can't quite remember. During the winter break, we joined the debate team, because we were in the same class. The teacher assigned us to the same group. Jimmy looked good, spoke politely, took the first impression of the judges in the first debate. As for me, I speak fast, love arguing, and took the second argument. Always chasing after the opponent during the free debate section. Our school's debate team usually ends up being one and done because no previous team had ever made it to the provincial competition. But this time, our group won every match. Jimmy won the best debater prize, and I won the best speaker. The teacher called a photographer to take a picture of our team. I held up the trophy and smiled proudly. Later, I asked the teacher for a copy of the photo, in which I was grinning from ear to ear, with Jimmy standing next to me, lips slightly curved, looking very elegant. I was wearing a shirt and a skirt. He was wearing a shirt and trousers, in black and white tones. It was the closest we got to dressing like a couple. After that, we never took such a photo again. But that's a story for another time. At the celebration banquet, the teacher said, "Oh Luna, with that small mouth of yours, how can you be so sharp? Here, let me toast you." Feeling pleased. As soon as I clinked glasses with the teacher, she raised her glass to Jimmy. Then she added, "But Luna, next time you have to learn from Jimmy. No matter how strong your content is, your expression should be in place, friendly, otherwise the judges won't like it." I said, "Yes, teacher, I really need to learn from Jimmy, in all aspects, comprehensively." I am actually being sarcastic because my dad often praises Jimmy at home. Of course, the teacher can't hear it, but Jimmy can. He glanced at me, expressionless as always, ignoring me as usual. I felt bored for some reason. Even until the celebration banquet ended and we moved to the KTV, I was not in the mood. The teacher nudged me several times, asking why Luna seemed to have used up all her energy on the field and stopped talking. I just smiled, grabbed the microphone, and sang a song called "Loyalty to the Country." Everyone cheered, probably not used to seeing a girl sing the song. This is a song my dad loves to sing, as he socializes a lot, and when I was young and no one cared for me at home, he would bring me along. The song requires shouting, and it made me feel comfortable as soon as I started singing. I was really getting into it when suddenly Jimmy shouted my name. I didn't stop and asked him through the microphone angrily, "What do you want?" He said, "Your dad is being rushed to the hospital." The music in the room was loud, he was close to me, and his words were amplified by the microphone. Someone must have turned the song to mute, and the teacher said, "Oh, is that so? Luna, you should go back quickly." Panicked, I reached for my phone but realized it was in the pocket of my jacket, which was on the other side of the sofa. I saw 5 missed calls on my phone, 1 from my dad, 1 from my stepmom, and 3 from my grandmother. I dropped the mic, grabbed my jacket, and left without wearing it. I ran blindly while making a call. I bumped into someone, not knowing who. "Are you blind?" someone scolded me. Someone behind me apologized, "Sorry, it's not intentional." "It's Jimmy." He chased after her. "Do you know where she is?" "I don't know," I replied, as my phone was completely unreachable. I urgently stopped and grabbed his sleeve, asking, "You know which hospital, right?" He glanced down at me, pulled his sleeve out of my hand, and I hailed an Uber, which had arrived. When the Uber stopped at the hospital entrance, my legs felt weak. I was panicking and sweating profusely. With each step, I wondered what had happened to my dad, how serious it could be, and then I remembered the only time I had been to the emergency room. It was when I saw off my mom. The emergency room was crowded with people, stretchers, white coats, fur bags, red crosses, all enlarged infinitely in front of my eyes. When I reached the surgery room door, I suddenly couldn't stand and started gasping, leaning against the wall. My stepmom was there and immediately supported me. "What's wrong with my dad?" I asked. She pushed away the sweaty hair on my forehead, made me sit on a chair, and said, "Stomach bleeding. He socialized too much and drank too much. Don't worry, it's not a big problem." I sat on the plastic chair, head hanging down, and slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Then, a cup of warm water appeared in front of me. The fingers holding the cup were very pretty. It was Jimmy. I was stunned, took the cup, and drank a few sips. The warm water soothed every corner of my body, and I held the plastic cup, not wanting to say a word. I usually argue with my dad and act tough with him, far from being a dutiful daughter. But now, in this situation of confusion and helplessness, surprisingly, it was my often targeted stepmom and Jimmy who made me feel safe. I closed my eyes, whispered a thank you, and my dad needed to stay in the hospital after the surgery. Mom, well, forget it, I'll just call her Auntie. Auntie is at the hospital taking care of my dad. She takes care of my dad so diligently, even if it's for the money, her care is worth it. My attitude towards Auntie and Jimmy has improved, not just superficially, but in a normal, respectful way towards elders and classmates. Both my dad and Auntie are often at the hospital, so only Jimmy and I are left at home. My dad gave us money for dinner and breakfast, letting us handle it ourselves. I don't eat out often because of my sensitive stomach, so I was unsure where to eat with the money. Jimmy, being more outgoing, knows all the nearby food stalls and restaurants. I followed him around shamelessly, unsure of what to eat. We entered a dark alley, and despite my hesitation, I followed him inside a Chinese restaurant where the food was unexpectedly good. We both ate in silence, with me being too focused on the delicious food to speak, while Jimmy seemed a bit annoyed with me. Luna, be confident, get rid of that, seems like. I told myself, amused by my own inner monologue. Jimmy glanced at me, finished eating, and went to pay the bill. To my surprise, he paid for both of us without saying a word. It was the first time I felt eating supper was so boring without my dad and his mom's chatter and laughter. The next day, Auntie returned home briefly and instructed us about some matters. We didn't live on campus, with the school being selective about dormitories. Students in the first and second years were day students, leaving the scarce dormitory spaces for the seniors. Normally, I would have been picked up by my dad at night for safety reasons, but with him in the hospital, Auntie requested Jimmy to accompany me home. I was reluctant at first, thinking I could go home with my friends. But seeing Jimmy frown, I changed my mind. He seemed surprised when I called him brother for the first time. Confused by my sudden respect, he asked me what was going on. After Auntie left, he inquired about my change in behavior, to which I innocently replied, I'm scared. Walking alone after 10, what if I encounter a thug? He gave me a look, then another. I said very kindly, just say whatever you want to say. He asked, do rogues not discriminate? After thinking for a moment, I immediately replied, get lost. And he obediently left. As I watched his school uniform swaying in the wind like a sail, I felt a bit embarrassed. In that moment, I suddenly realized that he was a lively 17-year-old boy who could crack jokes, not just the son of the impeccable stepmother at home. It was at that moment that I began to see him in the same way I would see someone my own age. The provincial competition was coming up in a few days, to be held in the neighboring city. The school attached great importance to it, believing that we needed to train the team well since it was our first time qualifying. So, they arranged for a focused training session. It was winter break at that time, and we trained during the day while doing homework at night. The people in the debate team were quite interesting, and I enjoyed listening to their banter whenever I had the chance. The third speaker was Tommy, a fun-loving guy who enjoyed everything and was fond of setting up pranks. After training, he would sneak out with his parents' car to take us for a ride. The fourth speaker was Peter, who seemed careless on the outside but was actually very thoughtful and had a sharp tongue. I often joked about switching debate partners with him, and he would just give me a strange look, then glance at Jimmy before laughing and saying nothing. During the 7 to 8 days of training, I mostly hung out with them. One day during training, Tommy cleared his throat and said, Luna, you go back first today. I won't be able to hang out with you. I immediately suspected something fishy. What shady business are you guys up to? Peter replied with a smirk, come on, it's nothing shady. There are places where boys can go, but it's not convenient for girls. We are just ensuring your safety. I thought they were heading to some adult entertainment venue. It was fine for Tommy and Peter to go, but if they were taking Jimmy, they had to take me with them. Half an hour later, we were sitting by a pond in the outskirts of the city fishing. I never imagined that the place they needed to ensure my safety was a fishing pond. Peter teasingly said, what's wrong? I thought you couldn't swim. I couldn't swim and wasn't good at fishing. After just 30 minutes of fishing, I had already talked to Tommy 20 times. Tommy was annoyed and said, lady, could you please stop turning your head to the right and glance at the handsome guy on the left from time to time, understand? You've been bothering me a lot. Jimmy and Peter clearly heard him. Peter chuckled and gave me a meaningful look. Finally, he said, enough fishing, let's play cards. I partnered with Tommy, while Peter and Jimmy were on the other team. I was bad at counting cards and kept making mistakes, ending up losing badly. Jimmy had a good memory, almost like a genius. Tommy complained that he couldn't be on a team with me because we kept losing. I retorted, weren't you the one who insisted on partnering with me before? Look at you now. Tommy dodged quickly and ran to the other side of the room, hands on his hips, and said to the other two, let's play dice. Whoever loses will be Luna's partner. At that moment, Jimmy stood up and sat beside me. Let's go. I'll partner with you. I was surprised. He glanced at me and shuffled the cards calmly, saying, good luck can turn bad luck. You might just change your luck. And then I broke his winning streak. After losing 3 games in a row, he didn't say anything, and I started feeling embarrassed. How about we grab a bite to eat before playing again? He firmly shuffled the cards. No. Let's play another round. I'll help you win. In the provincial competition, we fell short of victory. Well, it's not exactly a crushing defeat. Tommy won the Best Debater award, and I received the Debating Style award. As we were leaving the stage, the teacher was deeply disappointed. Luna, why didn't you attack the third debater? What nonsense was he talking about, and you were trying to reason with him? Argument is not your style, being aggressive is. I looked at him innocently, but teacher, didn't you tell me to learn a thing or two from Jimmy? Jimmy smiled and walked away. We ended up coming second in the provincial competition, and the only one unhappy about it was the teacher. The rest of us were quite content with the outcome. I was particularly content because my dad called to say he would be discharged from the hospital the day after tomorrow. Finally, I won't have to eat street food anymore. My happiness had returned. We parted ways once we got off the high-speed train. I followed behind Jimmy, dragging my suitcase. We chatted occasionally along the way, but as we neared the entrance of my residential area, his expression suddenly changed. I looked ahead, and besides a drunkard blocking our path, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, right? Just then, the drunkard stumbled towards us. I was startled. Jimmy stood in front of me, shielding me. He spoke coldly. How did you find your way here? Do you two know each other? The drunkard lifted his eyelids and chuckled. With that smile, his facial features bore a slight resemblance to Jimmy's. I can't come to where you and your mom live, he said. Jimmy's tone grew even colder. I asked how you found your way here. The man walked around him and looked at me. Is this your classmate? Why are you both carrying suitcases? Where are you off to? As he spoke, he started walking towards me, reeking of alcohol, and I instinctively stepped back. The man grinned and reached out to me. Jimmy, it seems you've raised a good kid. Before he could finish, Jimmy let go of the suitcase and pushed him away. I warned you not to come looking for us. The man retreated, and Jimmy grabbed his collar, repeating, how many times do I have to tell you not to come looking for us? I stood there, bewildered. The man glanced at me, said something, and Jimmy shoved him against a lamppost. If he had really pushed him down, it wouldn't have been a mere scuffle. At that moment, a security guard who had been watching approached, his baton drawn from his waist. What are you two doing? Jimmy remained silent. I quickly spoke up. It's okay, uncle, they know each other. Acquaintances. I guessed that the man was Jimmy's father. Jimmy glanced at me. His eyes looked shattered, indistinct under the lamplight. Just as he turned towards me, the man suddenly rose from the lamppost, grabbed a glass bottle and smashed it towards Jimmy. I didn't have time to react and instinctively pushed Jimmy aside. He stumbled as I pushed him. The bottle then landed heavily on my shoulder. Ouch. That really hurts. Could I have a fracture? The security immediately apprehended him. And another guard came out from the duty room, ready to call 911. Jimmy asked anxiously, are you okay? I paused for a moment and calmly replied, I'm fine. I'm actually not fine. Jimmy looked at me for a while, trying to assess if I was telling the truth. The streetlight cast shadows, illuminating his profile. His deep eyes, long eyelashes, straight nose, and pursed lips. It was like a finely detailed painting, each stroke perfect. I was stunned, completely forgetting the sharp pain in my shoulder. Jimmy furrowed his brow deeply, suddenly pulled out his phone, switched to the call interface, and dialed the numbers. 911. I instinctively grabbed his hand, our fingers touching, and then quickly let go. I rubbed my index finger against my thumb, but the sensation of that touch a while ago lingered. His fingers paused, and he looked up at me. I cleared my throat, preparing to speak. Although I used to always go against Jimmy, I had to admit that he was a person with a strong sense of morality. I knew that no matter who the bottle had hit just now, if someone had really been hurt, he would definitely call the police. But did he want to take his dad to the police station? He seemed tough, but did he really not feel weary and disappointed inside? I looked at him and said softly, I'm really okay, and if we call the police, we'll have to call a guardian, right? I guess he probably doesn't want his mom to know about this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so angry asking you repeatedly how you found your way here. He was silent for a moment. The streetlight cast a long shadow of him. He finally spoke, but what he said was, "I'm sorry." I looked up at him and whispered, "It's okay." The security guards restrained Jimmy's dad, threatening to call the police. He deflated and told the security guard, "I came to see my son, it was just a misunderstanding." Then he turned to Jimmy and shouted, "Right, son?" Jimmy looked at him expressionlessly and said, "Next time, I'll definitely call the police." The man sheepishly rubbed his hands and said, "There won't be a next time, no more next time." Ignoring him, Jimmy took my suitcase, one in each hand, and walked into the community. I stood still for a moment, empty-handed, following him, feeling pathetic, thinking, so this is how you get treated after being hit with a bottle? However, the treatment that followed was even better. While my dad had been discharged from the hospital, the doctors advised him to avoid strain and rest more. So, I continued to follow Jimmy to and from school. Unlike before when he reluctantly accepted me trailing him, since that day, he would wait for me every time he went out. Leaving the community, he signaled for me to hand over my backpack. He would carry it. When I was in primary school, my mom used to carry my backpack for me, then she left, and my grandma started carrying it. Later on, I carried it myself. I hesitated to hand my backpack to him, and he casually slung it over his shoulder. His figure with a backpack on each side was quite comical, but I couldn't bring myself to laugh. Later, my dad asked me in exasperation, "You're so young, do you understand what liking someone means?" I wanted to say, "I do." For example, at that moment, when the traffic light turned green, cars and people moved forward, but I found myself standing still as if spellbound. He walked leisurely ahead, his navy blue and white school uniform billowing like a sail in the wind, carrying a pink backpack on his left shoulder. Looking back years later, across the traffic flow at the intersection. The gaze of a girl towards a boy, an unknown starting point of liking. However, at that time, I didn't know what that moment of pausing and staring really meant. My relationship with Jimmy improved, my dad was happy, and so was his mom. But perhaps out of a woman's sensitivity, her happiness seemed to be accompanied by a hint of worried. I pretended not to notice and deliberately started acting cold towards Jimmy again. Grandma asked me to have dinner on Saturday, and added one more thing, to also bring Jimmy along if possible. I moved my phone aside and asked Jimmy, "My grandmother wants you to join us for dinner, are you coming?" Jimmy replied, "Of course, it's the first time she has invited me, I have to go." Aunt seemed to have something on her mind, but hesitated. I returned to my room, and when I was going downstairs to get a glass of water, I overheard Aunt asking my dad, "Did Mom really invite the two of them for dinner? Should we ask again?" My dad, watching the morning news, replied, "What's there to ask? Luna wouldn't lie to us, would she?" Aunt's voice lowered, "It's not that, it's just that Mom has never invited Jimmy before, I find it strange." My dad, sipping tea, chuckled, "She's doing it for Luna's sake." Aunt fell silent. Standing on the stairs, I didn't need the glass of water anymore, so I turned and went back upstairs. I bumped into Jimmy coming out of his room, staring at me strangely. I coldly said, "What are you looking at?" He murmured in surprise, "You're in a bad mood so early in the morning?" I harshly replied, "Just seeing you makes me angry." He jumped back, his messy hair seeming to stand on end. I ignored him and went back to my room. There was no water to drink in the room. I was so thirsty. My grandma not only treated Jimmy nicely for my sake, she also knew Aunt took care of my dad, which was not easy for her. But she couldn't directly show kindness to Aunt, so she expressed her attitude by inviting Jimmy for dinner. My grandma's cooking was really delicious, but unfortunately, her health hasn't been good in recent years and her hands would sometimes shake uncontrollably. I took a bite of the pig's trotter and immediately stood up to drink water. Grandma rubbed her apron and said, "Did I put too much salt? Getting old, can't even cook properly anymore." I quickly said, "Not salty, I was just thirsty when I arrived." Jimmy put the remaining 2 pig's trotters in his bowl and said, "Not salty, very tasty." Grandma smiled happily. I glanced at him discreetly. Not only was Jimmy a good grandson, he was also a good brother. The pig's trotter was actually very salty, but since he took it, I didn't have to suffer eating it. As we went downstairs, I looked back and saw Grandma waving and smiling from the balcony. In the towering buildings, there was only a small her in the huge window. I waved back vigorously, jumping and hopping as she smiled with her eyes squinted. "Go on! Be careful on the road," she shouted. We turned a corner and couldn't see the balcony anymore. I didn't know if she went back to her room or continued standing there watching us walk away. I suddenly felt a bit sad, realizing how fast time was passing and sighing at the inevitability of aging and loneliness. I kept looking back and Jimmy halted to wait for me. I wasn't paying attention and bumped into him. I quickly moved back, apologizing profusely. He suddenly reached out and ruffled my hair. It felt like he was not just messing up my hair, but also disrupting the inexplicable emotions inside me. I gripped the strap of my bag hanging down, suddenly unable to speak. Not long after, it was Jimmy's birthday, and my dad gave him a mountain bike. I went with them to buy the bike, and my dad asked if I wanted him to buy me one for my birthday as well. I said, "Do you not realize how lazy your daughter is?" Jimmy then asked the store assistant, "Can we install a seat at the back?" I looked at him in surprise. My dad glanced at him, then at me. Subconsciously, I curled my fingers. Even though there was nothing between Jimmy and me, I inexplicably felt guilty. Under my slightly nervous gaze, my dad suddenly realized and said, "That's a great idea. Then I don't have to pick you up anymore." I slowly relaxed my fingers and casually said, "Yeah, you can stay at home drinking porridge every day." After paying, we walked to the parking lot. I jokingly said, "Aren't you afraid of me and Jimmy falling in love early?" My dad found this statement particularly funny. His laughter startling the motion sensor lights in the parking lot. "You two are siblings," he said, looking at Jimmy, who just nodded. In the dim light, I looked up at him but couldn't see his expression. "We are siblings, Jimmy. But can we only be siblings?" Jimmy started giving me a ride to school. There was no idle drama scene with a girl holding onto a boy's waist as the wind blew her white skirt. First, I couldn't hold on to Jimmy, and second, I was in my school uniform. Also, to avoid suspicion, I would jump off the bike and separate from him a distance away from the school. The first time I did this, Jimmy asked, "Aren't you tired?" I stubbornly replied, "Not tired." He shook his head and pedaled ahead. I watched his school uniform billowing in the wind for a long time without moving. If you have no guilt, of course, you can be carefree. But with guilt in my heart, what do you know? During the autumn sports meeting, I reluctantly signed up for the 3,000-meter race stop because there were few girls in the class. The sports committee forced each person to sign up for an event. When I returned from the office after submitting homework, there was only the 3,000-meter race left to sign up for. I asked the sports committee, "Do you want me to collapse on the track?" The sports committee, a tall and sturdy man, nearly cried. He stood before me cautiously and said, "Luna, I'm really sorry. How about I buy you a bottle of water next semester?" Suddenly I couldn't be harsh anymore. I ran the 3,000 meters, basically aiming to collapse. But after actually running, being last wasn't satisfying. After all, with so many people cheering your name from the stands, and the boy you had a crush on doing high jump in the same area, I put in extra effort and surpassed 3 people. The sports committee and the girls went crazy and started shouting my name. It felt more intimate than calling for one's own mother. I wanted to tell them to stop, as I had no more energy left. By the 7th or 8th lap, my gaze had become distant. I asked the person keeping count at the finish line with a breathless voice, "Which lap am I on?" He looked at me sympathetically, "5th lap." "Help." Then my pace slowed down completely. Someone from the inner track ran beside me. "Luna, are you doing okay?" I looked and saw Peter. I was not dying yet. I replied. He smiled and said, "Take it easy, I'll walk with you, bro." He almost made me burst out laughing, so I picked up the pace a bit. Finally, I reached the finish line, my chest burning with pain. I collapsed on the ground, ignoring any calls for help. Peter tried to lift me, but I slapped his hand away. After looking at me for a while with deep eyes, he turned around and left. 2 minutes later, he came back with Jimmy. Jimmy seemed surprised to learn that I was running the 3,000 meters. He crouched down and said, "Are you okay? Should I take you to the medical room?" Peter joked, "Yeah, let Jimmy carry you to the medical room." I kicked him. Jimmy also heard the comment and gave Peter a strange look. Then he reached out to me, asking, "Shall we go?" Peter looked at me with a smile that seemed like he could devour me. Thankfully, the sports committee rushed down from the stands, ignoring the interaction between Peter and Jimmy, as well as my protests, and picked me up. I brought you some water, remember to drink more later. I was almost dragged away by him with his arm wrapped around me. It's actually better this way, as I don't have to pay attention to Peter's underlying words and Jimmy's hand hanging in the air. The changing of the guard in our student union is coming soon. The candidates for the student union president are chosen by the teachers, one from the liberal arts and one from the sciences, which are me and Jimmy. To be honest, I seem to have a different way of liking someone compared to many other girls. Regardless of whether we end up together or not, I hope the me in his memory shines brightly and brilliantly. Even if it means taking away his glory and achievements, as long as he remembers me, that would be enough. So, when the Ministerial Council's voting results hadn't been announced, I was quite nervous. I really wanted to win. It was almost obsessive. There were 7 members in the council, 4 voted for me and 3 for Jimmy. I felt quite proud, swinging my legs on the back seat of the bike and teasing Jimmy insincerely, "Oh, sorry, I got 1 more vote than you." He chuckled lightly and said that 1 extra vote was mine. I was so shocked that I grabbed his shirt directly. "What did you say?" He hit the brakes, turned to look at me, and smiled. "You really want to be the president, don't you?" "But I also wanted it for your sake." It was a Friday that day, with the sun about to set but not quite there yet, casting a faint red glow on his profile. Cars were whizzing by, and there was the scent of fried chicken and ice cream in the air. Suddenly, I didn't know what to say, my face feeling very hot under the sun. "Thank you," I said. "No problem." He continued riding the bike, the school uniform billowing like a sail in the wind. In the sunlight, his head looked fluffy. It seemed like it would feel nice to touch. I hesitantly reached out a finger and lightly touched his hair, then quickly pulled back. I looked around as if I were a thief and happened to be caught by a little girl eating an ice cream cone. Her big round eyes were fixed on me without blinking. My face suddenly felt even hotter. As I entered my senior year in high school, time flew by quickly, and the days seemed monotonous and dull. It was all about studying hard, with piles of exercise books forming mountains, and a pencil could run out in just 3 days. Occasionally, when I looked out the window at the sunset, I would think that the romantic feelings of that sunset day seemed like a long time ago. We were now seniors, living in the dorms, and each moment was laboriously spent. My contact with Jimmy also became less frequent. He was on the 1st floor, and I was on the 4th, and it was difficult to even catch a glimpse of each other when we didn't go home. In the hustle and bustle of those days, memories flooded in through every crevice, making me contemplate and toss and turn at night. He once brought me a box of ibuprofen when I was in excruciating pain, once took away my umbrella on a rainy day saying, "I'll cover you, bro." He once asked me what I was planning to put as my first college choice. What are these things? Are they proofs of love? There are always some shiny and sweet things in time, like sugary glass shards. You hold them, feeling they are too bright and clear, but when you grip them tightly, they will cut you and make you bleed. In the days overwhelmed by math problems, in the days from early morning to late at night, those whimsies grew wildly like weeds. Drowning out every inch of my attention apart from my studies, I developed an allergy to Jimmy. During morning exercises, during lunchtime, passing by the basketball court, going to the office to submit assignments, I could always spot him first out, even if it was just the back of his head, just an indistinct figure, or maybe a teacher mentioning in passing that this year Jimmy might achieve a top rank. My grades started to slip. I felt it was unacceptable. I wrote something to myself. I wrote, "Luna, you are turning 18 this year. 3 months later you will sit for the college entrance exam, about to step into freedom. After entering college, you can do whatever you want, pursue whatever you desire, but not now. Neither Jimmy nor love itself should be your stumbling block." I finished writing, feeling relieved. I bought a notebook with a lock, then bought a small locked box, put the letter in the notebook, placed the notebook in the box, and set the box on the top shelf of the bookcase to gather dust. Solemnly laid to rest the untimely infatuation. The results of the information lead came out. Jimmy lived up to expectations and achieved top rank. With Jimmy's level, he could easily choose any major at Harvard. My dad insisted on taking us out for a meal, dragging me out of the sea of questions. By the time I finished packing my bag and went to the door, Jimmy was already there. As soon as he saw me, he smiled. "It's only been 2 weeks, why do you look so exhausted?" I was actually quite happy to see him, but teasingly replied, "Can't compare with the Harvard study geek, I can only try my best to barely get into a decent domestic university." If you barely get into a decent domestic university, then our grades humanities average will be a second-tier one, he said. He grabbed my bag for me and got into the back seat. I dozed off in the passenger seat, and when I woke up, the car was already parked outside the restaurant. It was a Sichuan restaurant that I liked. My dad said, "So you'll definitely go to Harvard, right?" Jimmy replied, "If I get in, definitely." My dad then asked me, "What about Luna?" I sarcastically said, "I'll go to Harbin Buddha Institute." Jimmy chuckled at my response. Auntie said, "Don't ask too much, the child knows in her heart." "Isn't that right, Luna?" Not wanting to embarrass her, I said, "Yes, you're right, Auntie." My dad then kept urging me to eat more vegetables and drink more beverages. "You've lost weight," he said. I doubted, "Really?" "Clearly gained weight, more than 5 pounds. Stress-induced weight gain, deadly." Jimmy remarked, "Being a bit plump is good, it's festive, like the fish holding New Year's painting doll." I tightened my chopsticks, retorted not so kindly, "You're thin, so thin you resemble Yu Qigong, standing by the door would ward off evil." He casually replied, "How could I be like Yu Qigong? I also hold a fish, just like you." Auntie's hand trembled as she poured the drink, and the coconut milk spilled over. Jimmy went to Harvard, where he could choose any major he wanted. I chose Renmin University and decided to study a niche subject. The advantage was that we were very close in distance, just 7 bus stops away. I showed them the map, and my dad said, "Oh, that's good, Jimmy, please take care of Luna." Jimmy just smiled and said, "Of course." My dad was pleased and satisfied, so he went back to watching the news. Auntie took Jimmy to the room and said something to him, but I didn't know what. Anyway, in the first 3 or 4 months after school started, despite the short distance of 7 bus stops, we only met once. And it was a chance encounter. Peter was quite impressive. He got into Harvard through self-recommendation. Not long after finishing military training, he asked me and Tommy to visit Harvard. In our group of 4, messages kept popping up until the time and location were confirmed, but Jimmy never said a word. I didn't know what was going on with him, so I sent him a private message on WeChat. He took half a day to reply, saying, "I'm fine, don't overthink it. Just don't." I lost the reason to care about him and the excuse to reach out to him again. Several times, I opened our chat window, typed something out, and then deleted it word by word. Eventually, I compulsively clicked on his profile picture, only to browse through his few moments and our scarce chat history. I dissected those simple phrases like doing a Chinese language comprehension exercise, repeatedly trying to find hints that resonated with my feelings. But there weren't any. Every sentence was ordinary, just the type of conversation that normally happens between classmates. The proofs of his liking me that existed in my memory suddenly became elusive. Does he love me? Does he not love me? It's as if I am standing on a debating platform with both sides being myself. However, a sentence suddenly popped into my mind: "He has never said he likes you, it's all just your imagination." The debate that had been ongoing immediately ceased. I sat there blankly, thinking, yes, he has never said it. But why did I immerse myself in my own imagination and couldn't come out? I felt like I was back in some nights during my senior year, anxious over declining grades, now losing sleep over an unrequited crush that could break at any moment. I couldn't sleep for many days. On the day we were supposed to meet, I looked in the mirror. The reflection showed dark circles under my eyes, pale skin, and a weary and feeble appearance. I suddenly got angry at Jimmy, and angry at myself. Luna, are you sick? He's cold to you, yet you still go looking for him, losing sleep over him? Are you so pathetic? Pathetic! I angrily pointed at the person in the mirror. There are plenty of fish in the sea, why fixate on an unattainable love? After cursing, I felt relieved that the person in the mirror still had pale cheeks, but there was a different spark in her eyes, at least not as despairing as before. I quickly freshened up, blew my hair into a fluffy curl, and asked the girl from the next room who was good at makeup to help me with my look. Afterward, she looked at my wardrobe and said, "Luna, why don't you even have a dress? Take this, consider it a lucky charm," as she handed me her supposedly lucky outfit. When I looked at myself in the full-length mirror again, well, the person in the mirror was clearly me, no change in features from eyebrows to face shape, but much prettier, as if I could be described as charming and coy just by casually swearing. The metaphor I made about myself gave me chills, and my hair stood on end. I bid farewell to the girls, and she smirked, saying, "Wish you success." They all knew I had a crush on a boy at Harvard. But they didn't know that we hadn't been in contact for a long time. Including the day Tommy tagged him in the group chat, and he finally came online and said, "Oh, I wasn't at school that day, sorry." I avoided the ambiguous glances from the girls, forced a smile and said, "All right, wish me success." How am I going to succeed? As I chatted and laughed with Tommy and Peter along the way, but suddenly saw Jimmy on the road outside the cafeteria, I knew that my pretense of calmness was about to collapse. Jimmy was wearing a black down jacket, the one he took off and gave me after that argument with my dad when I left home. He seemed to have grown a little taller, his hair a little shorter, carrying a packed lunchbox in his hand, walking quickly. Tommy said, "Hey, isn't that Jimmy?" Peter smirked, looking at me. "Yeah, isn't that Jimmy?" I looked at him coldly. "So what? What's it to me?" Peter whispered, "Luna, don't be tough." Before I could speak, he called out Jimmy's name. Jimmy's figure stiffened for a moment, then turned around. I could see it clearly. He had not only grown taller, but also gotten slightly tanned. He saw us, with a momentary blank expression on his face. Then he hesitated and took a step towards us. "I thought you had something and weren't at school?" Tommy asked. Jimmy smiled. "It got rescheduled last minute." Peter also smiled, saying, "You're not being fair, not telling us it got rescheduled. Didn't want to see someone among us or something?" As he spoke, his gaze seemed to hint at me. Jimmy also looked at me, paused, and smiled. "No. It's just a coincidence." "Have you guys had lunch?" Tommy said, "Not yet, we're going for barbecue, do you want to join?" In this situation, if Jimmy refused, it wouldn't be appropriate. He obviously knew this, so he readily agreed. As we dodged the bikes passing by, Tommy said, "It's still better in college, just casually having a pretty girl sit on the back seat. Who dares to do that in high school?" I froze for a moment, raised my eyes to sneak a peek at Jimmy. Caught red-handed by him. Then he nonchalantly looked away. Peter said, "Jimmy dares, right Jimmy?" He was speaking to Jimmy, but his eyes were fixed on me. I slowly said, "Peter, you're not making any sense." Peter laughed. "Luna, I was talking about Jimmy, not you. Why are you so protective of him?" Tommy didn't know what was happening, and tried to defuse the situation. "What are you guys doing? Come in and eat, stop fooling around." I ignored him, stared at Peter, and said, "Who are you really talking about? Don't you know yourself?" Peter smirked, his eyes devoid of any humor, then he turned to look at Jimmy. "Do you know what's going on? I'm talking to you, and you keep talking about him. What's the deal?" Peter's dark eyes bore into me as he calmly said, "And why are you always defending him?" Tommy was confused, looking at me and then at Peter. At that moment, Jimmy slowly spoke up, saying, "So you've seen it, I gave Luna a ride. There's nothing to hide from you guys, we're siblings. We're siblings." Those 5 words felt like a heavy blow to my head, ringing in my ears. He did think that way. "We're siblings, with a natural and insurmountable bond." Peter was stunned for a while, then looked at me. "You guys are siblings?" Jimmy looked at me, his profile shrouded in the shadow cast by the streetlight, making it hard for me to discern his expression. I finally found my voice, mechanically replying, "Yeah, I lost my mom in elementary school, and my dad and his mom formed a new family." Amidst the surrounding noise, our group was quiet. Tommy broke the silence, saying, "Hey, don't take this too hard, Luna. Peter didn't mean to hit a nerve. Let's eat, let's eat." The barbecue skewers sizzled. Tommy flipped them with tongs. I ate the fragrant barbecue in silence, unable to swallow. We chatted for a long time that day, just like every previous team dinner. Tommy was chatty, Peter and Jimmy provided comic relief. I teased him occasionally, laughing most of the time. But I knew clearly that every word I said, every smile I showed, was pretending. Pretending everything was normal, pretending this gathering was just like before. But it wasn't. I was not okay at all. When we parted ways, Tommy said, "Luna and I will leave first." Peter said, "Sure, see you next time." I looked at him and said, "Goodbye." He looked a bit guilty, hesitant to speak. I didn't want to say more, turned to Jimmy and said, "Goodbye." This time, he didn't avoid my gaze, his expression rather tender. He said, "Goodbye, Luna. Goodbye, goodbye. Goodbye, to the person I once liked. Goodbye, my brother, Jimmy." After that, I never contacted Jimmy again. And he didn't come looking for me either. Fine, I thought fiercely, there are handsome guys everywhere, one less won't make a difference. You wanted to be siblings, then let's be siblings. Who's afraid of whom? I spent a lot of time in the club, playing around with a group of friends. We would have dinner together and everyone would get drunk. After dinner, we would head to the KTV and continue drinking, moving crates of beer. Everyone would cheer, saying, "Luna, you're from the north, you must have a high alcohol tolerance." My alcohol tolerance was decent, but I couldn't handle drinking a mix of baijiu and beer. I got drunk, collapsed on the sofa, and passed out. I had a long, fragmented dream. In one part of the dream, I was sitting on the back seat of Jimmy's bike. The sunset was beautiful, and the ice cream was delicious. I don't know where I found the courage, but suddenly I hugged his waist and he turned around, smiled at me, and said, "Luna, we're siblings." I felt terrible, and when I looked up, I found myself lying on the track from the day we ran 3,000 meters. Jimmy reached out his hand to me, and as I slowly put my hand on his, Peter stood in front of me, chuckling, and said, "Luna, I already knew, but you didn't, did you? You and him, it's impossible, don't you know that?" I shouted at him to shut up, but Auntie was standing in front of me instead. Auntie said, "Luna, was it your grandmother who asked Jimmy out for dinner that day? Or did you lie to me in order to go out alone with him?" I screamed that I didn't lie, that I knew we were siblings. And I had been very restrained, so why were they still forcing me like this? And then I was shaken awake. The colorful lights in the KTV were still swaying, and I didn't know who was singing. The melody was pounding in my ears. I could barely see someone standing in front of me, but tears from my eyelashes dripped into my eyes, causing more tears to flow, so I had to close my eyes again. My head hurt, and my stomach ached. Someone handed me tissues to wipe my tears, and when I opened my eyes again, I saw Jimmy. In a white shirt and black pants, he pursed his lips and had no expression. "Am I dreaming?" I asked. Lisa said, "Don't blame me, you looked like you were going into shock just now. I unlocked your phone with your face, and he was the only one in your contacts." Jimmy's lips curled up slightly, then quickly faded. I gritted my teeth and looked at Lisa. "You must want me dead." Lisa exclaimed, "No way, girl, this guy is pretty cute. Seize the opportunity." "Shut up. He's my brother." I yelled. Okay, Lisa shrugged, patted Jimmy's shoulder. "This good brother here, be understanding of Luna, she gets irritable when she drinks too much, she's not usually like this." Lisa went to sing, leaving just me and Jimmy in the corner. Silence, still silence. It was pretty awkward, especially with the background music playing sad love songs. I grabbed my bag, tipped Jimmy's wrist, and walked out. As soon as we reached the corridor, I let go of his hand. The corridor was much quieter. Jimmy looked at me with drooping eyelids. "Aren't you going to say something?" I replied, "What do you want to hear?" Jimmy chuckled, "Anything will do. Like why you drank so much, why you're still outside at 1 in the morning, why the only contact in your address book is me." As he finished his sentence, my ears buzzed. "Shut up," I said. At this hour, there was no pharmacy open in this area. My stomach was hurting badly, and I huddled on the roadside. Jimmy had been stubbornly following me, insisting that I tell him everything. When he saw me crouching down, he was surprised. "Is your stomach hurting? Is it because you drank too much?" I whispered softly, "Can you please shut up?" He fell silent. Then I said, "Could you please leave quickly?" He replied, "I'm not leaving." After a pause, he added, "Let me take you to the hospital." Memories of what I saw in the emergency room in elementary school flashed through my mind. The Red Cross, stretchers, crying patients, and the sorry look in the doctor's eyes. My stomach began to ache severely, and I said, "I'm not going." Jimmy also crouched down, using a tissue to wipe the sweat off my forehead, and then said, "I've called an Uber." Suddenly, this moment felt familiar to me. Occasionally, a vehicle rushed by, leaving a trail of sound on the quiet road. The light from the street lamp illuminated his face, highlighting the contours of his brow and eye sockets. In his clear eyes, there was only me. I said, "Jimmy, don't be so kind to me, don't let me misunderstand." He hesitated for a moment, not speaking immediately. Just then, a car approached from the west, and Jimmy breathed a sigh of relief, stood up, waved at the roadside, and shouted, "Here." He didn't respond to what I said until we got into the car. With my stomach hurting badly and feeling dizzy, I rolled down the car window to let the cold Massachusetts wind hit my cheeks. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror and said, "Young lady, are you drunk?" I didn't respond, not in the mood. Jimmy said, yes. The driver took another look at us and asked, are you young lovers having a fight? Irritated, I replied, we're not a couple, he's my brother. The driver chuckled, oh, I must have been mistaken? You two don't look alike at all. The colorful scenes rapidly retreated in the car window, forming one colorful beam of light after another. I closed my eyes, drowning everything in darkness. After some time, feeling drowsy, I suddenly heard Jimmy say, you didn't miss here. I opened my eyes abruptly and stared at him. What did you say? He said slowly, I said, I like you. I was stunned for a moment, then grabbed my bag and hit him hard, yelling, don't mess with me. He blocked my bag, held onto my hand, and said, although this is not the right place to confess, I think, I really like you. I was completely stunned. The driver interrupted, young man, what do you mean? Confessing in my car, are you making things difficult for them? This statement was not humorous at all, but I started laughing. As I laughed, I began to choke up. We hadn't spoken in months, not even interacted on social media. You inexplicably treated me coldly, without even a reason. You said we were siblings, okay, then I'll consider you my brother. I slowly pried open his fingers, so, you come here and suddenly tell me you like me. Why don't you just drop dead? Jimmy's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. Before, I wasn't sure, I was confused. I sneered, so now you suddenly figured it out? He remained silent for a moment, then said, I'm still not sure, but I feel like, in a situation like today, any man should confess. Unconsciously, I asked, what situation today? He replied, when you were asleep, you called my name and cried. The driver let out a chuckle and clicked his tongue twice. I felt like I was suffocating. Damn it, Lisa. Jimmy looked at me, his white down jacket reflecting a faint light, like a white sail in a dark sea. He seemed patient, as if waiting for my answer. If you say you like me, do I have to agree? He asked. I looked at him coldly. Ever since the day you said we were like siblings, it was impossible between us. There are plenty of handsome guys chasing after me. Who do you think you are? Jimmy looked at me for a moment and then said softly, so, what should I do? I retorted, that's none of my business. He looked crestfallen, but I felt even more disheartened. Confessing my feelings should not have been like this. It should have happened on an evening when the moon had just climbed to the treetops, the sky still a hazy blue dusk. By a lake, or at the foot of a mountain. I should have been dressed beautifully, wearing beautiful makeup, and then I would tell Jimmy that I liked him. If he accepted, all would be well. If not, I wouldn't feel like a loser. The most important thing was to maintain a graceful demeanor. Even though none of the elements I had imagined were present, there shouldn't have been a long, heartbreaking estrangement before the confession, shouldn't have happened in a taxi, and especially not with a cabbie ready to burst out laughing with ears perked up. It felt miserable. Just as I felt like I was about to explode, Jimmy suddenly cleared his throat. I looked up at him and saw that he seemed a bit nervous. Then he said, driver, excuse me, could you stop laughing? The driver chuckled, hey, I just love seeing you young folks falling in love. Okay, young lady, don't be upset, can I not listen? He put on his headphones and started listening to music. The lampposts flickered in and out, casting rapidly shifting shadows. Jimmy's face was alternately lit and then cast into darkness. He cleared his throat again and said, at first, I actually disliked you, thought you were a princess with an attitude, sensitive and bossy. But then, don't pinch me, let me finish my words. Later, when you shielded me from a bottle at the bar and didn't even cry from the pain afterwards, I thought, maybe I misjudged you. I stared at his face, feeling a sourness in my heart. He didn't notice my gaze and continued, after that, I started to find you quite cute, and you're actually pretty smart and good-looking. I kind of started liking you. Hey, stop, even when I praise you, you still pinch me. Do not move, okay? He tightly held my hand, our palms pressed together, as if feathers were tickling my heart. Suddenly, I felt too afraid to move. He said, but we are like siblings, and I always felt I shouldn't like you. So when I realized I liked you, my first reaction was no, it's not right, I can't feel this way. It would hurt you, I'm sorry. Siblings, we're just siblings. His words overlapped with my dreams, plunging my heart to the bottom of a ravine. I pried open his fingers, coldly asking him, "Are you talking in your sleep now?" His hand reached over, intertwining our fingers. Light from passing lampposts occasionally illuminated his features, the boy I once liked, stubbornly holding onto my hand, ears turning red but trying to appear calm. He said softly, "Now I feel like saying, to hell with being siblings. If I like you, then I'll admit it." I couldn't help but laugh, and as I did, my eyes welled up with tears again. Jimmy reached over to wipe the corner of my eye, gently saying, "I'm truly sorry, I didn't mean to make you unhappy. Seeing you upset makes me feel miserable too." I moved away from his hand, but my tears plopped onto the back of his hand. His hand paused in midair, deflated, and after a while, he said, "Or you could hit me, curse at me a bit, just stop crying." I actually punched him a few times, and as he jokingly said he would have to go to the hospital, he laughed and put his arm around my shoulder. The night was enchanting, as if time and space had frozen in that moment. The person I liked held me with care, treasuring me. Thump thump thump, thump thump thump, whose heartbeat was racing so fast, who gently placed a kiss on my forehead. And who whispered softly in my ear, "Luna, let's be together. We are together now." When we have no classes, he takes a 7-stop bus ride to come and have dinner with me. The winter in Massachusetts is beautiful, with a deep blue sky without a single cloud. I sit on the back of his bike, finally able to openly hug his waist. I gently rest my head on his back, the breeze brushing against my cheeks. And sometimes I wonder if I am dreaming. Jimmy just smiles and asks, "Have you wanted to do this for a long time?" I reply, "Haven't you?" He jokingly says, "I am a serious guy." I playfully pinch his waist. He quickly changes the subject, saying, "But, if you're willing to call me brother, I wouldn't mind." I coquettishly say, "Brother, I want a kiss." He chuckles, then suddenly breaks. The moon has just climbed up the treetops, and the sky is still a hazy blue. The bike stops right at the foot of the mountain. He grabs my hand and starts walking forward. I ask, "But we haven't arrived yet, right?" Without looking back, he says, "But brother wants to kiss you. My dad knows I have a boyfriend now. His mom knows he has a girlfriend. They both agreed, during the winter break, come home and have a meal together. If they knew that the 4 people were actually just 2, they would probably kick us out. So, we agreed to keep it a secret for now. During the winter break at home, we were extremely polite. My dad asked me quietly if there were any conflicts between me and Jimmy. I looked puzzled. Then he chuckled and said, "As long as everything is fine, it's all good." After talking, he added, "If he did something wrong, tell me and your aunt, don't keep it to yourself. Given a little since you're siblings, it will pass." As soon as I heard the word siblings, I would remember when Jimmy said, "Screw this sister." I spoke firmly, "Are we siblings? Do we have a blood relationship?" My dad became more certain that Jimmy and I were having issues. He comforted me, saying, Okay, no blood relationship, not considered siblings. Don't get angry, it's only been a few days since you came back, don't scold me." I stared at him and said, "Not considered siblings, you said it yourself." He replied, Yeah, not considered siblings. We're doing a big cleanup tonight, don't forget." I pretended to forget. Jean called me out to go shopping, and I naturally took the opportunity to slip away. But if I knew that slacking off would bring such serious consequences, I definitely wouldn't have done it. My dad called me back, his voice heavy, saying only a few words before hanging up. I messaged Jimmy, but he didn't reply. I had a bad feeling, so I called my grandma and asked her to call my dad at 9 o'clock, reminding him that we have dinner together tomorrow. Grandma laughed on the phone. "Did you make your dad angry again by messing up?" I pretended to be ignorant and chuckled. She then said, "Okay, but when you go back, remember to apologize to your dad and show some humility." From childhood to adulthood, Grandma has always been my savior. With her promise, I returned home with peace of mind. The lights at home were very bright, looking spotless after a thorough cleaning. My dad was sitting on the sofa, holding a piece of paper in his hand, his face so dark it could drip water. I saw it clearly. There was an open box on the coffee table, with a broken lock next to it. That was the coffin where I had hidden the love letters. Now the lock was broken. Suddenly, I wasn't afraid at all, but instead, anger surged through me like a flame. How dare you rummage through my room and peek at my things? My dad slammed the coffee table hard. Watch your tone. I took a deep breath and tried to calmly say, I placed the box at the top of the bookcase. How did you get it? It had a locked lid. How did you open it? You saw the letter I hid, so you are justified, right? Auntie stood beside him and said, Luna, when I was dusting the bookcase, I accidentally knocked over the box, causing the lock to break. There was a notebook inside, and when I picked it up, this letter fell out. I mechanically turned my head to look at her. Her usually gentle and smiling face showed no emotion. Luna, tell Auntie the truth. Is what you wrote in the letter all true? I forced a smile uglier than crying and said, Auntie, I wrote it for myself. No need to lie. My dad roared, Luna, he is your brother. Auntie asked again, is Jimmy the one you dated in college? Without flinching, I looked at her and said, yes. My dad slapped me hard, with force. The sound was particularly loud, and I was hit so hard I turned my face away. It seemed like my dad was surprised by the loud slap he made, as his hand hung in the air for what seemed like eternity before he put it down. Then he didn't say another word and sat heavily back on the sofa. At that moment, the door opened and Jimmy came back. Without even looking up, he started chatting and laughing. As soon as I went downstairs to buy fruit, the whole family got together. Why are you crying? I really hadn't planned on crying, but as soon as I saw him, I couldn't help it. Jimmy put the fruits in the hallway and looked at us in the living room seriously. He clearly noticed the strange atmosphere, but his demeanor was calm, even bending down to grab a tissue from the coffee table and handing it to me. Why are you crying? My tears fell even more heavily. Auntie asked, Jimmy, are you dating Luna? He answered candidly, yes. Auntie was surprised by his frank answer, choked for a moment, and then said, before you went to study in Massachusetts, I told you to take care of Luna as a sister. Did I say that? After a moment of silence, Jimmy replied, you did. Auntie went on, I also said that you were both grown-ups and should maintain boundaries, not overstep them. Did I say that? Jimmy answered, you did. Aunt said, since I have already said it, why didn't you listen? Jimmy paused and said, because I like her. My dad said, you two are siblings. Jimmy laughed and said, but nobody asked if we wanted to be siblings. The air was so still for a few minutes that we could even hear the ticking of the clock. After a while, Aunt said, are you blaming your mother for this? Jimmy stopped laughing and solemnly said, no, because you have your own life. But I don't want you to be angry about this, because I also have my own life. The drama of that day ended with a phone call from my grandmother. I don't know what my grandmother said, but after my dad hung up the phone, he told us to leave and not bother him anymore. I put the letter back into the unlocked box and carried the box upstairs. It felt like I was attending a funeral. Jimmy followed behind without saying a word. Aunt called him back. Jimmy, you sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow, I will have someone come and switch your room with the study. Our house is a duplex, with the master bedroom, guest room, and main study downstairs, and 2 rooms upstairs, with one originally being my bedroom and the other my study. Later, Jimmy moved in. And the study was converted into his bedroom. Jimmy stopped in his tracks and chuckled in a ridiculous manner, saying, Mom, is this really necessary? Aunt calmly said, we didn't consider it carefully before, but now we can remedy the situation. Jimmy, don't make it difficult for Mom. Jimmy clearly wanted to say something more, but when Aunt uttered the last few words, he clenched his fingers. After a while, he said, okay. I couldn't bear it anymore, holding the box and trudging up the stairs. There were footsteps outside the door, pausing at my door, and then leaving. I stood behind the door, clutching the letter, tears falling from my eyes. The tears dripped onto the letter, causing a tiny blot of ink to spread. Naively, I used to think that what stood between us was senior year, was the college entrance exam. I regarded him as my belief, overcoming various obstacles to become the victor of the exam. But as I crossed the bridge, I realized that the college entrance exam was just a trivial obstacle between us. I hugged my knees, finally crying in pain. The next morning, when I went downstairs to drink soy milk, my eyes were swollen, my double eyelids turned into single eyelids. There were fried dough sticks and steamed buns on the table, and the buns were filled with pickled vegetables and tofu, which I instantly knew were from my favorite store. That store was located on another street. My dad rarely bought from there because he thought it was too far, and there was always a long line. But today, it was on the dining table at 7:30 in the morning. My dad was still watching the morning news, not even glancing at me. I nibbled on the bun, tears falling into the soy milk bowl. I initially felt very aggrieved, but now I suddenly felt so tired that he finished his meal, grabbed his briefcase, and left. Before closing the door, he said, "We are going to Grandma's house for lunch today, all of you should come." I looked up at him, he didn't look at me, and with a bang, he closed the door. Grandma made braised pork with vermicelli today, it smelled delicious. But the highlight was not the delicious food on the table, but what Grandma said, "Luna, come for a walk with me to aid digestion." Grandma lives in an old residential area, where all the neighbors are familiar to us. As we walked, we met many acquaintances. "Oh, isn't this Luna? Haven't seen you in a long time, you've grown into a young lady," they said. Grandma smiled and replied, "Yes, she has become a young lady." After the people left, I focused on stepping on footprints in the snow. Grandma asked me, "Are you dating Jimmy?" I had anticipated she would bring this up, so I replied listlessly, "Yes." Grandma chuckled and said, "Look at your eyes all swollen today, you are really hopeless." I self-deprecatingly said, "Well, I've been hopeless for more than a day or two." Grandma asked, "Do you know why your dad is so angry?" I said, "A man's heart is like the depths of the sea, how would I know?" Grandma poked my forehead with her finger and said, "You heartless child, your dad is just worried about you." She paused and continued, "He didn't want me to tell you this as he always feels you are still young. But let me tell you, one needs to understand social norms and etiquette. The earlier you understand, the less you'll be taken advantage of." What does this have to do with social norms and etiquette? Grandma looked at me for a while and said, "Take Jimmy's mother, for example. You and Jimmy are not siblings, both are decent kids who know each other well. Why does she intervene? Because she's afraid of gossip. If you two really get married, what will she become? Will she be part of a new family, or will she be there for your dad's inheritance?" My face turned red all of a sudden and I blurted out, "Why are we talking about marriage?" Grandma waved her hand for me to be quiet and continued, "I'm asking you, when you two are in a relationship, isn't it with the intention of a lifetime commitment? Or is it just for fun?" I was speechless for a while. She then smiled, "That's it, right? Sooner or later, this topic will come up, you can't avoid it. Originally, your dad only had you as his child, the inheritance he and your mom built up is all yours. Jimmy is the younger one, when he gets married, your dad may give him a maximum of a few $100,000. But now, things are different, although the law doesn't prohibit you two from getting married. If Jimmy marries you, speaking of inheritance, what's yours will be his as well? Won't your mom's relatives scold your dad? Will your dad and aunt have any face left? Luna, this is not just about you and Jimmy, do you understand?" I was stunned. Not paying attention, I stepped into a snowdrift, and the ice-cold snow water seeped into my shoes. That day, I didn't make any reckless comments about inheritance. I knew every word Grandma said was crucial, the biggest obstacle between me and Jimmy. This obstacle even had nothing to do with my dad's and aunt's personal wishes, it came from social norms, a rule passed down through generations. Living a lifetime, you need love, you need money, but you need dignity more. Grandma put it this way. I stood lost in thought in the snow, my feet as cold as ice, but I didn't feel it. Grandma said for me to think it over properly, she would chat with Jimmy again. Jimmy quickly went downstairs and stopped when he passed by me, reaching out to rub my cheeks, asking if I was feeling cold and telling me to go back inside quickly. I looked up at him, and he appeared calm, completely unaware of what was about to happen next. "Jimmy," I said, "my grandmother used to be a Chinese teacher and later became a school principal." He responded with a non-committal sound, "So what?" I continued, "She is very good at persuading people." He smiled and asked, "Were you convinced?" I remained silent for a while, and he reached out to tousle my hair, not saying anything profound, just telling me to go back inside quickly and not catch a cold. As he walked towards my grandmother, his black down jacket swayed like a sail on the vast sea. After my grandmother and Jimmy finished talking, the three of us walked upstairs together. I deliberately slowed down a bit, sticking to her and asking, "How did it go?" She clearly knew what I was referring to but pretended to be clueless, asking, "What do you mean?" Getting impatient, I asked, "What was Jimmy's reaction?" She snorted, looked at me for a moment, and said, "If it were during World War II, someone like you would have switched sides in an instant, but he remained steadfast in his will." The old lady ignored me and walked upstairs with her hands behind her back. I stood on the stairs and suddenly laughed. Later, my dad and aunt didn't say anything and turned a blind eye. Jimmy and I returned to school early, just like my dad said, avoiding each other when unnecessary. Jimmy was especially hardworking. He was already a top student and was also working on a business project with his seniors. When we weren't together, he often worked late into the night. I had a feeling this had something to do with me, so I asked him what he had told my grandmother, but he wouldn't say. After being nagged by me, he smiled, touched my cheek, but evaded the question. Luna, your dad and grandmother really love you, you know? I asked, and you? He chuckled, of course, why else would I work so hard to build my future wife's dowry? My face turned red. I could guess what he and my grandmother had discussed. The ability to silence gossip is absolute power, as my dad had told me. But at that time, his main purpose was to motivate me to study hard and excel, to prove my worth through academic achievements, instead of getting into fights with boys. Perhaps my dad didn't expect that I would be the listener, while Jimmy would be the one truly following through. I tiptoed to kiss Jimmy, catching him off guard. By the time he reacted, I had already run off. He caught my hand, pressing it against my forehead. The sound of the computer operating echoed in the small room, making the silence particularly unsettling. I saw his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. Before I could grasp what I was doing, my hand had already touched it. With suppressed gaze, he looked at me, saying, Luna, do you know we shouldn't mess with a guy's Adam's apple? What happens if you do? He leaned in to kiss me, and as I could only hold onto his waist to catch my breath, he calmly explained, it would end up like this. The light was just right at that moment, with a gentle spring breeze. Holding hands, we were so close that we could hear each other's heartbeats. I held onto him, burying my head in his neck, whispering softly, Jimmy, I feel like I'm dreaming. He sighed and said, it seems like we haven't been close enough. I picked up a cushion and threw it at him, but he caught it and set it aside. The sunlight was streaming in through the window, illuminating his features. And in his eyes, I could see the reflection of my blushing cheeks. All the feelings of unreality that had been haunting me for so long suddenly disappeared. It turns out that the hopes I had written on paper were really coming true. The tears I had shed were being wiped away by someone. The unrequited love I thought would come to nothing was being rewritten into a promising future. The road ahead may be rough and bumpy, but he was by my side. And that was enough. Jimmy, I hugged him, I've liked you since I was 17. He whispered in my ear, what a coincidence, I feel the same way.